Okay, sorry, we got interrupted. Now let's continue along the same line of thought about the
Okay, right.
ghost.
So as I was saying, he arrives in this town, and one of the first individuals he encounters is a ghost
Hmm.
of a large young black man. Which of course he doesn't know it's a ghost at first, and eventually he figures out that this was a young man that was rumored to have committed suicide 3 decades earlier. But
Okay.
as he investigates the story, he finds out it was in fact not a suicide, but it was a lynching. And the story is all about trying to uncover who was behind the lynching and then finding a way to bring them to justice.
Interesting. That's fascinating because he learns. I mean, obviously, it's a plot twist there that you learn. As he unravels the story itself versus the reality of the ghost, and finds that something there that wasn't known. And as are reading the book, so maybe you'd like to read a little bit of a few passages from your books for us, so we can get a
I
kind of
picked one
sample of
from
your
the
writing style.
I picked one from the second book, but I will pick one from the first one for you.
Okay.
One of the things I should probably explain is that
Hmm.
in his finding of the ghost, one of the things that I have done differently with my ghost stories than almost any other ghost story. If you are a fan of the fiction, ghost stories fall into almost all ghost stories fall into two categories. The
Hmm.
one category is what I would call the Stephen King wannabes. So
Hmm.
these are ghost stories that are terrifying. You think of Poltergeist,
Hmm.
those kinds of ghost stories that are really scary. The other type are ghosts, what I call Casper the Friendly Ghost stories.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of cozies that have a ghost, and the ghost is the ghost of my grandmother who owned the shop, and the
Hmm.
ghost is always funny or helpful or whatever. What I attempted to do in mine was I did a great deal of research on ghosts. So although I do take a few literary liberties, basically all of the interactions that I have ghosts do with um, humans have all been documented in the literature.
Hmm.
So the ghosts, for example, the ghosts are never able to tell them who killed them. The ghosts don't ever have those kind of answers.
Wow.
So Daryl has to work on his own to figure out precisely what happened, where did it occur, who was involved. And in this case, there's more than one involved, so it's kind of a big deal.
Okay.
Do me a favor and stop recording for a second, because I had picked one for the other one, but I want to make sure I pick a good selection and not just lumber on here.
Okay, just a second.
In each of the books, Daryl encounters a medium. For those the uninitiated, that's someone who can speak to ghosts.
Hmm.
But the medium in this small town can't make enough money being a medium. So the medium is also a lady of the evening.
Okay. Hmm.
Which creates some interesting dynamics when Daryl goes to get some help from her.
Hmm.
And in this particular scene, he is there Daryl is to see the medium, whose name is Natalia. And he's there with his girlfriend. His girlfriend said, "You're not going alone, I got to go with you." So that's kind of where we start. Okay.
Good.
It's a fun part.
Reading the book.
When the door opened, Natalia slouched against the wood frame. Her small, shapely figure was encased in a black midi dress, revealing plenty of thigh, and Daryl guessed even more. Thin spaghetti straps looped over bronze shoulders, allowing the plunging neckline to reveal a generous view of breasts. The red and blue scarf he'd seen on her earlier visit was cinched around her slim waist, causing the dress to ride up even higher. Daryl Henshaw, you came back so soon. Have you returned to teach me some history? Her brown eyebrows raised and her mouth creased into a leer. Perhaps you have returned to sample my other talents. Her gaze flicked to Aaron. Oh, and you brought a friend. This could be interesting. A manicured her hand made a flourish, inviting them inside. As they walked through the doorway, Daryl started, Natalia, this is my friend. Aaron cleared her throat. Daryl corrected, this is my girl, Erin Cavity. Natalia shut the door and came around Daryl. The two women faced each other. Erin, tall, lithe, and athletic. Natalia, short, dark, and curvy. The medium stood her ground and glared at Erin. This only emboldened Erin, who edged close enough to tower over the smaller woman. Neither said a word, and he stood by helpless. Their eyes shot daggers at each other. He really needed Natalia's help, but didn't want to screw up what he had with Erin. Natalia's smirk never faltered. She kept her gaze focused on Erin, even though she spoke to him. I don't normally do a threesome, but for Daryl Henshaw, I will make exception. I can help this one reach great feats in pleasuring you. Erin spoke through barely gritted teeth. Don't need any help in that department. I know all about the body. After all, I'm a nurse. Still, Natalia began. Natalia, I told you on the phone, I need your help as a medium. Oh, all right. Medium gave a long sigh. Come and sit at the table as before. She untied the scarf from her waist and fastened it as a bandana, cinching her long black hair. Her head jerked toward Erin. She will have to leave. Not going anywhere, Erin said. Then she can stay over there. Natalia pointed to the side part of the small apartment that held a queen bed with ruffled sheets. Give me your hands. Natalia's voice mutated to the deep, creamy tenor it had on his earlier visit. He placed his hands in hers and immediately felt the heat radiating from her fingers and upper arms. When he stared down to where their hands joined, he saw only flickering shadows created by the candles. Someone you know has already met her fate, Natalia said. He said, Ruby, I told you a shroud of malevolence surrounds this spirit. It has already claimed one victim. It will claim more. What? Are you saying more will die? Natalia tilted her head back as her gaze drifted to the ceiling. When she brought it back down, her eyes were white orbs. Daryl stared, unable to look away. Natalia said, it is unclear, but yes, this evil will claim more victims. I am not sure how many. Daryl glanced over at Erin. He could not let anything happen to her. Then I need to stop. I don't want anyone else to get hurt, much less die. That is no longer your decision, Daryl Henshaw. Your presence here has opened a portal to the other side. There are those who do not want this conduit and will do anything to stop you. Oh my God. Natalia's eyes returned to normal. She gave her fingers a squeeze and unleashed another bolt of heat up his arms. Daryl squirmed, but she didn't let go. That is not why you have come here. You have received a message from the ghost, and you need my help with it. He withdrew 2 papers from a clipboard he'd placed alongside his chair. The first is simple. It says, help me. I found the computer. Now, I think we found out who this ghost is or was. His name, I think, was Hank Young, and I believe he was lynched at the school some 30 years ago. Daryl's glance went from the paper. Natalia's glance went from the paper to Daryl. That is good. If you are correct, it will please the spirit that someone remembers, and perhaps he will be more open in contacting you. Daryl laid the second sheet on the table between them. This was left in my office. That's why I came. What does it mean? When the medium didn't respond, he asked, is it almost too late because of the evil? Natalia moved her head slowly back and forth. I do not think so. It is the building. What? The high school? What about it? The building is scheduled to be demolished, is it not? When the new high school is finished? Yeah, sometime next summer, I think. We believe spirits, like Hank's spirit, are tied to physical buildings, the place of their death. His lynching, if you are right. If you are not able to help him take care of his unfinished business, then he will not be able to cross over and will be trapped forever between worlds. She looked at Daryl. He will become a lost spirit.
Wow. Lots of tensions going on there, and that between the two women, between the man and the male character, and then of course between the ghost fate, what's going to happen. So that's interesting that you brought all this into one little passage, in a few pages of the book. So yeah, it's wonderful. I really find that captivating.
Many of the readers have said that Natalia is their favorite character.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
She's a very small part in each of the books, but they love the part she plays.
Interesting. Yeah, it's quite a fascinating character. She's alluring. She's kind of snappy a little bit. So yeah, that was a fascinating passage. If you'd like to read from your other book as well, we have time for that.
Okay, all right. Something that'll be good because it's something very different. So
okay.
Crimson on Cape May. Daryl and his girlfriend Erin are investigating the death of a bride that died on her wedding night.
Mm-hmm.
After much checking, they end up finding out that the bride's death is tied to a human trafficking ring that's going on actually not in the city, but near the city. And they have enlisted some help and with some of the less desirable elements in the town, some of the street urchins is what they would used to say. So in fact, his partner in part of this, there's another whole POV in the second book, and that POV is a homeless teen, a runaway teen, who also happens to be sensitive, who can see ghosts the way Daryl can. Okay, so and we're right about in the middle of the story of this particular piece.
Okay.
And they have had a tough day and are coming in to go to sleep. Oh, once in the room, Daryl threw open the sash and they all settled into their places. Not even bothering to undress, they fell into bed. Erin in front, Daryl spooning behind her. Pogo, who is a little pug dog, Pogo huddled in a heap at his master's feet. In less than a minute, Daryl heard Erin's quiet snore and he relaxed and surrendered to blessed slumber. Arrgh! The sound of Pogo growling startled him awake. His unconsciousness tugged at him, pulling him back, not wanting to let him go. Now? What was the matter with that dog? He dragged his eyes open and saw the pug. The dog was perched on the edge of the bed in the small space in front of Erin's middle. His legs stood rigid, head thrust forward, big black eyes focused on something on the floor. Arrgh! Pogo, hush, you're going to wake Erin. Even as he said this, Erin squirmed beside him. For only a moment, the dog shifted its gaze to Daryl and then glared back at the floor. It's probably a mouse or something, he whispered. He'd seen a small gray creature scurry across the floor once before. The perils of being on the first floor with an open window. Arrgh! Hoping not to disturb Erin, Daryl raised up on his elbow to peer over her. Trying to get his eyes to adjust, he peered around in the gloom, searching the area where Pogo was facing, and thought he saw movement. What was that? His fatigued brain was too confused to make sense of what he was seeing. He heard a small rustling sound near the door, then something that sounded like scratching against the wood. What was that sound? He couldn't even tell where it was coming from. He fought to concentrate, trying to rouse his drowsy senses. He stared at the floor and saw some shape move in the darkness. No, not move, slither. Shit, a snake. Then the scratching on wood came again. What was that? He stared into the shadows. It was probably only a garter snake. He'd seen one or two in the shrubs around the building. They were harmless, ate bugs and mice. He looked again. The muted light from the street lamp streaming through the window turned everything black and white. But even in the dim light, the markings on the stake looked off for a garter. Garter snakes wore wore thin, bright stripes on their long bodies. This one had a stripe, but with a series of black splotches on its back. He sat bolt upright, bumping Aaron hard. "Hey, Daryl," she said without opening her eyes. "Not tonight. I'm way too tired. Maybe in the morning." Daryl gaped as the creature slid along the ground, covering the short distance from the window to the bed. "Hurry, get behind me." The urgency in his words must have nudged her. Her eyes struggled open, gazing at Daryl on his knees over the top of her. "Quick, behind me, now." He used a little gymnastic to get his legs over her so that his body shielded hers, but he made no quick movements. Aaron complained, "What's the matter?" Still lying, she turned and her eyes followed Daryl's gaze to the floor. "Is that what I think it is?" In the dim light, the head of a snake rose up, its long body sliding along the floor. Its evil tongue jutted in and out of a triangular head. "Timber rattler." It made only the smallest sound, a slight rustling along the wooden floor. Then the scratching noise again, which now Daryl realized wasn't scratching, it was rattling. But they'd been too far asleep. They probably would never have heard it if it hadn't been for Pogo. "Arr!" The pug growled again, as if challenging the intruder. Daryl searched frantically for something to defend themselves, a weapon, anything. He had to protect Aaron at least. He wasn't sure what to do. The creature slithered farther into the small space. It raised its ugly head higher, the forked tongue flitting in and out. It was huge. Based on the part of the snake's body Daryl could make out, he guessed it was almost 5 feet long. Daryl saw the pillow, a flattened, thin thing, but better than nothing. He snatched it up and held it in front, working to keep it between the snake's head and them. As the snake slithered along the floor, Daryl had to crawl on his knees along the edge of the bed to keep the pillow between the snake and them. Then the rattling intensified, the movement of the creature's tail a blur. Out of the corner of his eye, Daryl caught something else, a long handle. The maid must have left an old broom in the corner next to his bed. Without taking his eyes off the snake, he still held the pillow in one hand and reached out slowly with his other arm, feeling for the smooth wooden handle. He grasped it. Yanking it, he swept the straw end toward the rattlesnake, and the creature slithered back a foot or so away from the bed. He jumped onto the floor. He used the broom to scoot the snake farther back, away from Aaron and Pogo. Then he heard Pogo's paws scrabble off the bed and onto the floor beside him. The dog growled again. Hearing the snarl, the creature turned, raised its head, the rattle shaking furiously. Its tongue flicked in and out as if tasting the fear in the air. Daryl's gaze went from the pug to the snake. It was going to strike. He dropped the broom, the handle smacking the wooden planks. The slam startled the snake, which withdrew a few inches and turned, ready to attack again. Then in one swift motion, Daryl wrapped the pillow just below the snake's head and grabbed it. He stumbled a bit, but managed to right himself and keep his arms out stiff. The creature writhed fiercely in his hands, its tail lashing at Daryl's legs. Pogo growled louder now and called, "Stay back, boy." He gripped the snake's head and held his arms stiff out in front of him. Daryl inched out the door. He read that he shouldn't make any quick moves. In the silence, his slow footfalls echoed in the wooden corridor. The pug stayed at his heels, panting. The hallway seemed impossibly long. Twice in the trip, the snake whipped its long body back and forth. It struck Daryl with such force, he yelped and almost dropped the creature twice. Chest heaving, he reached the front door, bounced the push bar with his hip, and tiptoed down the stairs. His eyes scanned the surroundings, desperate, looking for an option. He couldn't just let the snake go. He would stand there barefoot. He'd make a perfect target, not to mention Pogo. He spied what he needed, chained to a post, a metal garbage can with a metal lid. In a slow, easy move, he pulled the lid off and dropped the snake, pillow and all, inside the metal can. He slammed the lid down and held it in place. The snake thrashed inside, its body striking the metal sides again and again. Though muted through the metal, the rattle grew louder, angrier. Pogo scurried over the can and growled again. Panting, Daryl droop like an old man, his adrenaline expended, his mind rushing to catch up.
Talk about a night off there. That's quite captivating, though. You get in, there's empathy with the animal too, in a way, because you recognize the, a part of the instinct of the animal, and there's that passage where you say you can feel the fear in the room, and I thought that was interesting. That was probably, to me, the most exciting part, was when you get inside the animal and you recognize that the animal also has senses and is alert and alive. I thought that was really fascinating. So we have a couple of minutes remaining. If you want to, say something to fellow writers out there to encourage them, as well as maybe say a couple of thank yous to, people who've influenced or inspired you over the years.
I would be glad to do that. I always have a couple of pieces of advice that have served me well that I try to pass on. And the first one also involves a thank you. So the single greatest asset that I have found in the past half dozen years or a little longer is a really great writing group. So I'd encourage writers, if they have not been able to find a group of writers who are both supportive and critical, to reach out. There are writers groups everywhere looking for serious writers that to connect with. We're always looking. Ours happens to be called the Tuesday Dayton Writers Group. And it's not a large group. It's only a group of about 6. And the group is very diverse. Science fiction, poetry, a true life story.
Obviously,
one about
ghost stories, mysteries.
Really broad range of writers, but they all bring something different, and they all contribute to my writing in this case, and point out things that I would never have either seen or thought of. And that's the one real advantage. The other advice I have, if they haven't done this yet, if they're a serious writer, they need to find and go to attend one of the writing conferences that you mentioned, like you mentioned in my introduction. I've been to about a half a dozen, maybe, and the 3 I mentioned are my 3 favorites that I've enjoyed, and I attend whenever I can. But the difference is the writing will give you new ideas. The idea that I had for the ghost came because I was actually attending a writing conference. They'll help them make connections. They'll get to rub shoulders with famous and best-selling authors who will give them some really great advice. And I've been amazed. I've probably met at least a dozen, maybe 14 best-selling authors, people like Janet Ivanovich, Hank Willoughby Ryan, people that everybody knows, C.J. Box. And with one exception, everybody else was super nice, super friendly, willing to go out of their way to help other writers. So they're going to find that a really, really big advantage if they do that. And I guess my third advice is, if they're not doing this regularly, they need to write every day.
Absolutely.
Don't be afraid to write enough, throw it away, start again. Young writers, because I do a lot of work with schools because of my background, and I tell young writers that the book that they see in front of them has probably gone through 10 different levels of revision.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Randy Overbeck. I'm Dustin Pickering, your host, and we are looking for donations at paypal.me/nyparrot. That's paypal.me/nyparrot. If you have not subscribed out there, our viewers, you must subscribe. It's right there on the button at the YouTube. Just push that subscribe button. You'll be in touch with us on the keep it on the draw as far as our guests and who is on in the program itself. And this is the New York Parrot Literary Corner. We're looking for 1 million subscribers. Don't forget that number. We're looking for 1 million subscribers. And if you want to be in touch with me, New York Parrot at the Literary Corner at newyorkparrot.com. Get in touch with me if you want to be on our program. Thank you very much again, Dr. Overbeck. It's been wonderful talking with you. I hope everyone has a pleasant evening and have a wonderful afternoon and night for yourself as well. And I'll get you the program as soon as possible. I'll send you the link. So join it.